Sister-in-law called me. She said the biggest regret of her life was letting my brother marry me. This was the 10th time she'd said it to me. I didn't hold back anymore. I immediately cut off her $20,000 a month study abroad allowance. A week later, my mother-in-law received a call from the UK. A single sentence from the other end of the line left my husband's family stunned. The phone rang while I was reviewing the quarterly financial statements for my company. The office was dead silent save for the low hum of the climate control system. I glanced at the screen, that familiar UK number again. I hadn't saved it under a name, but the string of digits was already etched into my memory. My fingers paused. I let it ring 5 or 6 times before I leisurely swiped to answer. "Hello, Grace." Chloe's voice traveled from thousands of miles away, laced with that deliberately drawn-out grating tone. In the background, I could faintly hear the cacophony of music and laughter. "What are you up to? I hope I'm not disturbing you, our resident workaholic." I gently set my pen down on the report and leaned back, sinking fully into the wide leather chair. "If you have something to say it," I said calmly. "I still have work to do." "Ooh, such a harsh tone. You must be really busy," she sneered. The music softened, suggesting she had moved to a quieter spot. "It's nothing much. Just a reminder that tuition for next semester is due. The school is getting pushy. The deadline is next week. Also, I've got my eye on a new bag. It's a new Birkin limited edition. All my friends have one, and I'm the only one who doesn't. It's so embarrassing when we go out." This was the 3rd time this month she had come up with a new excuse to ask for money. The last tuition payment was just made not long ago. The limited edition bag I had just bought her a new season Chanel last month. I didn't say anything. I picked up the water glass on my desk and took a slow sip of the now lukewarm lemon water. When she noticed I wasn't agreeing immediately, as I usually did, her tone instantly sharpened. The background music vanished, completely replaced only by her shrill, rising voice. "What, you're not happy about it again? Let me tell you something, Grace. You're just a petty, classless person. If my brother hadn't been so soft-hearted and insisted on marrying you, do you think you'd be where you are today? Running a company. Being a CEO. In your dreams. You married into our Miller family, so isn't it only right and proper that you help out your sister-in-law? You get so stingy over a little bit of your money. The biggest regret of my life was not stopping my brother from marrying a thing like you. You just ruined the mood by being here." The 10th time. In the 2 full years since she went to London, this was the 10th time I'd heard a similar speech. The first 9 times, for the sake of Leo, for the sake of this superficially peaceful family, I endured it. All I got in return was her escalating demands and increasingly brazen insults. Those words were like poison-tipped needles stabbing me again and again. At first, they hurt. My hands would tremble with anger. Later, all that was left was numbness and a cold bitterness. On the other end of the line, she was still rattling off my supposed crimes, giving my mother-in-law dirty looks, refusing to cough up money to help my brother's company through a crisis. It was as if I were a piece of filth my brother had accidentally stepped in, and couldn't shake off sucking the Miller family's blood to get where I am today. I gently placed the glass back on the desk. The bottom of the glass made a sharp click against the solid wood, a sound that was jarringly loud in an office filled only with her voice. "Are you finished?" I interrupted her. My own voice was surprisingly steady, even tinged with a faint weariness. She probably hadn't expected this reaction. Her torrent of accusations choked for a second, then flared into even greater fury. Her voice was ear-piercing. "What's with that attitude, Grace? I'm talking to you." "Chloe," I said, speaking each word slowly and deliberately to ensure she could hear every syllable from across the ocean. "Your monthly allowance is cut off starting now. Figure out the tuition yourself. And as for that limited edition bag, don't even dream about it." "What, you dare?" Her shriek nearly shattered my eardrum, filled with incredulous rage. "Grace, are you insane? Do you think I won't tell my brother and my mom right now and have them deal with you? Just you wait to be kicked out of the Miller family? Do whatever you want." I even allowed a small smile to form, though she couldn't see it. "And let me correct you on one point. Every single penny you've spent these past 2 years was earned by me, Grace Miller, not by our Miller family and your brother's company. The only reason Apex Builders has managed to crawl out of its pit in the last 2 years is because of the investments and contracts I brought in. Remember that. Without me, your Miller family is nothing." Before she could unleash a fresh wave of crazed screaming or a torrent of sobbing, I decisively pressed the red end call button. The world was instantly quiet. The echo of her shrill voice seemed to linger in the earpiece, but was quickly swallowed by the steady hum of the central air. I sat up straight, my eyes falling on the open financial report. The numbers on the page now seemed exceptionally clear and solid. Then I picked up the intercom and dialed my assistant, Sarah. Sarah, notify the finance director to immediately terminate all payment authorizations for the supplementary Amex card under my name ending in 6,688. Yes, the one that makes a regular monthly transfer of $20,000 to the UK. Effective this very moment, any transaction attempted from that card must be blocked and reported directly to me for confirmation. I paused my tone, leaving no room for argument. If the old Mrs. Miller or Mr. Miller himself goes to the finance department or calls about this, tell them to come directly to me. Tell them this is my direct order. Hanging up, I rose and walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling window. Outside, Boston's bustling evening skyline unfolded a river of traffic and a galaxy of lights. The office was utterly silent, filled only with the sound of my own breathing. I suddenly felt that this breath was smoother than on any other day. The air sharper and fresher than ever before. It turned out that severing a toxic supply line didn't feel like pain. It felt like liberation. I knew this was just the beginning. The storm was coming. But I was ready. The mother-in-law. The air after that phone call seemed to congeal for 48 hours. The house was terrifyingly quiet. Leo used the excuse of company business to avoid coming home for dinner for 2 straight days. Not even a phone call. I knew he most likely knew and was either avoiding me or trying to figure out how to approach the situation. As for my mother-in-law Sharon, the longer she remained silent, the more her fury was likely building. Sure enough, on the afternoon of the 3rd day, the doorbell was rung with the force of an earthquake. The rapid, angry ding-dong sounded as if someone was trying to smash it. I didn't need to guess who had arrived. I happened to be sorting through some old magazines in the living room. I calmly walked over and peeked through the peephole. Outside, my mother-in-law's face was a long, grim mask, her lips pressed into a thin, hard line. She clutched the small designer handbag that my late father-in-law had supposedly bought for her on a trip to Italy, now gleaming with years of careful maintenance. Her other hand was still pounding on the door. I took a deep breath and unlocked it. The moment the door opened a crack, she forced her way in like a gust of wind, not even bothering to change her shoes. Her well-maintained feet clad in heels clattered across the wool rug in the center of the living room. She spun around a finger, jabbing almost into my nose, her lips painted a dark, angry red. "Grace, are you trying to stage a rebellion?" I closed the door, locked it, and then slowly walked to the sofa and sat down. I even smoothed out my skirt before looking up at her. "Sharon," I said mildly, "what are you talking about? Why are you so angry? Sit down, have some water, and calm down." "What water? I'm full of anger. Just looking at you makes me furious." My mother-in-law's chest heaved violently, her voice high and shrill, echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. Chloe called me crying. She was a wreck. "What is wrong with you? On what grounds did you cut off her living expenses? Is that your money to cut off? That's the Miller family's money. It's Leo's money. You're an outsider. You're overstepping. Do you really think you're the one in charge of this family?" Her words came out like a machine gun, spittle flying. I looked at her flushed face and the veins bulging on her neck from agitation. A frozen lake inside me remained perfectly still. So this was it. This was the family I had gotten in exchange for 10 years of marriage and endless tolerance. I had spent my money and energy to maintain this family's respectable facade, and in the end, in their eyes, I was still an outsider. They could command at will, an outsider who should be grateful to hand over everything she had. I didn't rush to argue. Instead, I leaned over, opened the drawer under the coffee table, and took out a thick, black-covered binder. The corners were slightly worn, a sign of frequent use. I slapped it onto the gleaming glass coffee table right in front of her. Thwack. "Sharon, don't get worked up. And don't yell. Since you came here today talking about money, about the Miller family's money, let's put aside all this empty talk of mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Let's just settle the accounts. Let's be practical. Let's just talk about money." I opened the binder and pushed it to her side of the table, my finger tapping the densely packed printed spreadsheets. From the very first day Chloe decided to go to London, every single expense of hers that passed through my hands, big or small, I've recorded it right here. Date amount, purpose, vendor, it's all crystal clear. Some entries even have screenshots of her iMessages asking for the money. My mother-in-law was taken aback, clearly not expecting this. She shot a hesitant glance at the binder, her eyes quickly flitting away as if the numbers might burn her. But she remained stubborn. So So what? Doesn't every family keep accounts? A girl studying abroad, seeing the world, networking, buying a few nice things to dress up. Isn't that normal? Our family isn't some poor household that can't afford it. You married into the Miller family. Helping out the family, helping your sister-in-law, isn't that what you're supposed to do? Don't you even understand that? Supposed to do, I repeated the words as if I'd just heard the most ridiculous joke in the world. I picked up the binder and flipped to a page in the middle. My finger traced the lines as I read out loud slowly and clearly. October 3rd of last year, a wire transfer of $10,000 for urgent course materials. On October 7th, a charge of $4,000 for a limited edition Cartier bracelet for a classmate's birthday. On October 15th, another transfer of $6,000 for a dress and registration fee for an important academic conference. On October 25th, another $3,500 because she was stressed from her studies and needed to go skiing in the Alps with friends to unwind. This is just a partial best list for a single month. Do you need me to keep reading? Should I read November and December? Or how about the $100,000 she took in 5 separate installments in the first half of this year for that so-called investment project? My mother-in-law's face changed colors from red to white. Her lips trembled as she tried to retort, but she couldn't find the words. The specific dates and amounts were like cold stones pelting her. She had probably never imagined that her quiet, submissive daughter-in-law wasn't just capable of enduring, but also of keeping meticulous, damning records. Sharon Chloe is 25 years old, not 15. She's studying business in London, not alchemy. I closed the binder and looked directly into her flickering eyes. In 2 years, not counting the fixed $80,000 per year for tuition and basic rent, just for this so-called networking, buying nice things, de-stressing, and investing, Chloe has taken an extra $280,000 from me. That's an average of nearly $12,000 a month. And that doesn't even include the holiday cash I give her in the family's name. Leo's company has been having trouble with cash flow since the second half of last year. Several projects have delayed payments. He comes home late every night, so worried he smokes on the balcony in the middle of the night, his brow constantly furrowed. Do you know about this? Have you ever asked him? In your heart, is there only room for your brilliant daughter studying abroad, the one who needs endless money to network and de-stress? My words were like icicles delivered calmly but hitting her right where she was most vulnerable. My mother-in-law's face was flushed, her chest heaving even more violently. She pointed a finger at me. You stop using my son to make a point. I don't understand business matters. That's between you and your husband, Chloe. Chloe might be a bit of a spendthrift, but isn't that because you two spoiled her? As her sister-in-law, couldn't you have talked to her, guided her? Did you have to resort to such a drastic measure, cutting off her allowance? She's all alone in a foreign country. What will she do? Without money, how will she eat? Where will she live? If something happens to her, can you take responsibility? She is 25, Sharon, not 5. Legally, she is a fully competent adult, I said, my tone flat but resolute. The first lesson an adult should learn is to be responsible for their own actions. She can choose to get a part-time job, she can choose to be frugal, she can even apply for a student loan. As for money, I paused looking at her and stating clearly, she still has a brother who dotes on her like a precious jewel, and a mother who thinks of nothing but her well-being. You or Leo, whoever feels sorry for her, whoever wants to send her money, I will not stop you. I won't say a single word. But I leaned forward slightly, my gaze locking onto hers, speaking each word with deliberate clarity from me, Grace Miller, from every single cent that I have earned. Not another penny will ever flow into Chloe Miller's account. The money I've given in the past, I'll just consider it money I threw away on a bad investment. From now on, it's impossible. Is what I'm saying clear enough? My mother-in-law stared at me, her eyes wide, her finger trembling as she pointed. She sputtered, You. Her face turning purple with rage. Finally, she managed to choke out, Fine, you, Grace. You've got your wings now, haven't you? You're rich, and you look down on your husband's family. You just wait until Leo gets home. Let's see if you're still this arrogant. This family isn't yours to run. With that, she snatched her small designer bag, her arms swinging wildly with anger, turned, and slammed the door behind her with all her might. The massive bang reverberated through the spacious living room, seeming to make the crystal chandelier tremble. I sat on the sofa, unmoving, my gaze fixed on the black binder on the coffee table. The dense numbers inside were proof of my foolishness over the years, and also my most powerful weapon now. I reached out gently, stroking the slightly curled cover, then snapped it shut with a click. I locked it back in the drawer. This was just the beginning. My mother-in-law's rage, Leo's predicament, it was all expected. Next, it would be time for the main character herself to make her move. I picked up the cold water and took a sip. The icy sensation slid down my throat, but it only made my mind clearer. The husband. Leo didn't get home until after 11 p.m. I was still awake, finishing up some work in the study. I heard the sound of the front door opening and closing, shoes being kicked off, and then heavy, tired footsteps coming up the stairs. He paused at the bedroom door, hesitated, then turned towards the study. He pushed the door open, reeking of smoke and whiskey. His tie was askew, the top 2 buttons of his shirt were undone, and his face looked gray and haggard under the study's cool white light. My mother-in-law's furious phone call that afternoon had clearly been embellished, probably with a dramatic, tearful performance. He pulled off his tie, tossed it onto the arm of the nearby armchair, and then sank heavily into the sofa. His body slumped as he raised a hand to rub his temples, closing his eyes. He sat like that for a long time before opening them. Look at me. First words were in that exhausted, peace-at-any-cost tone. Grace. Mom came by this afternoon, didn't she? What's going on with you and Chloe? Mom is so angry her blood pressure shot up. She just took her medication and went to bed. I saved my document, closed my laptop, and folded my hands on the desk looking at him. Why don't you first ask what your sister did to me? What she said to me, that made me decide to cut off her allowance? Leo sighed again, his voice hoarse. Chloe is still young, we spoiled her. She's immature and sometimes says things without thinking, without any tact. You're her sister-in-law, you're older. Just be patient with her. Don't stoop to her level. She's alone in a foreign country, the culture is different, and she's under a lot of academic pressure. It's normal for her to be a little emotional. Why don't we? Just reinstate her allowance. Do it for my sake. Let's not blow this out of proportion. It'll be easier for me to explain to Mom. You know how Mom is, she dotes on Chloe. The second Chloe cries, Mom gets upset. It was the same old tune. Trying to smooth things over, asking me to be the bigger person, using his sake and the family's difficulties to emotionally blackmail me. In the past, I might have softened, thinking about family harmony, thinking about how he was caught in the middle, and I would have compromised again and again. But this time, the deep-seated humiliation from that phone call, the words, "The biggest regret of my life was letting my brother marry you," were like a poison-tipped nail driven into my heart, tearing out flesh and blood when, pulled. That combined with the cold disappointment built up over 10 such incidents had turned my heart to stone. Leo, I cut him off before he could continue his persuasion, my voice clear and calm, especially distinct in the quiet night. First, she is 25, not 15. Legally, she is a fully competent adult who should be responsible for every word she says and every action she takes. Second, she has it tough. Is it tough for her when she's living lavishly in a foreign country, buying limited edition bags, attending luxurious parties, and flying to Europe to ski whenever she feels like unwinding? Was it easy for you, working yourself to death, drinking until you threw up at business dinners when your company's cash flow was about to dry up, and the bank was breathing down your neck for loan payments? Was it easy for me? When I had to drink, until I was hospitalized with a bleeding stomach ulcer to land a client staying up until 3 or 4 in the morning to finish proposals. Does any of our money grow on trees? Does it just appear while we're lying down? Leo was struck dumb by my barrage of questions. His exhaustion was quickly tinged with the irritation and shame of having his reality exposed. Then what do you want me to do? Are you saying we should just ignore her? Let her fend for herself in a foreign country. She's my sister. My own flesh and blood. Can't you just take a step back for my sake? She is your sister, not mine, I retorted, not giving an inch, my tone even colder. I have no obligation, and certainly no reason to use the money I've earned through hard work, and at the cost of my health to support a sister who treats me like an enemy, and an ATM who calls me a thing, and wishes I would get out of her family's house. Immediately. Leo, I'm making my position clear tonight. I am cutting off Chloe Miller's allowance, and that's final. And not just her allowance. From now on, any expense of hers beyond basic tuition and accommodation, I will not pay another cent. That is my bottom line. Leo's face darkened completely, his weariness replaced by anger. He shot up from the sofa, looking down at me. Grace, do you have to be so rigid, so merciless? Do you still want this family? Do you still want this marriage to work? Can't you think about the bigger picture for this family? Wanting this family and stopping the support of a 2- and 5-year-old giant infant are not mutually exclusive. I also stood up, meeting his angry gaze without flinching. Then I played the card I had been preparing, the one that would hit him where it hurt most. If you insist on taking care of her, if you absolutely must continue to unconditionally support Chloe, fine. We'll go to a lawyer's office tomorrow and draw up a formal post-nuptial agreement, a clear division of our corporate and personal assets. My company, Aura Designs, and all my investment income will be completely independent of the Miller family, with no further connection to you. Your company, Apex Builders, and your income, you can subsidize your sister or even your parents however you want. I won't have a single complaint. But my money, my company, no one will touch a single cent of it again, including you. Leo's head snapped up, his pupils constricting as he stared at me in disbelief, as if seeing me for the first time. His lips trembled, and for a long moment he couldn't speak. He never imagined I would be so resolute that I would directly propose dividing our assets. My company, Aura Designs, though not as large in scale as his Apex Builders, had the advantage of high-quality projects, stable profits, and extremely healthy cash flow. His company, on the other hand, looked impressive on the surface, but was bogged down by several stalled projects and a tight cash flow. It often needed my help with funds or used my company's credit to secure loans. If we truly split, his company probably wouldn't last a few months. You, he stammered, his face going from red to white, his voice dry. Are you threatening me? Threatening me with divorce and splitting the family? No, I'm reasoning with you, stating the facts and giving you a choice. I walked around the desk and stood in front of him. We were so close I could smell the stale mix of smoke and whiskey on him. The choice is entirely yours. Either you support my decision, go back and manage your mother and your sister, and tell them my bottom line is not to be crossed. Then our family can maintain its superficial peace, and I will continue to support your company as needed. Or we do things by the clear rules of business. We separate everything completely. Think about it. You don't have to answer me right now. With that, I didn't look at the complex storm of shock, shame, anger, and conflict on his face. I walked straight past him, out of the study and back to the master bedroom, locking the door behind me. I knew the bottom line and the leverage I had just presented were like a sword hanging over him and his family. I also knew he was destined for a sleepless night. He would weigh the pros and cons, calculate the gains and losses, and struggle painfully between family ties and reality. And that was exactly the effect I wanted. I wanted him to see with absolute clarity that what held this family's superficial peace together wasn't kinship, but the tangible capital and capability of me, Grace Miller. Without me, they were nothing. The desperate sister. Sure enough, before Leo could give me his final answer, Chloe's overseas calls came again, relentless as a debt collector. This time she'd gotten smarter, or perhaps she was just furious and called my personal cell phone directly. She timed it well, 10 p.m. our time, 3 a.m. in London. She probably figured I'd be woken up and disoriented. I watched the familiar number flash on the screen, letting it ring 7 or 8 times before I leisurely answered. I didn't speak. I just put the phone on the desk, turned on the speaker, and continued flipping through the industry report in my hands. Grace. Her voice was shrill, raspy from crying, and thick with an undiluted hatred. The background was quiet. She was probably in her luxury apartment. You're ruthless. You really did it. You really cut off my money. Do you have any idea what I've been through these past few days? My card was declined. I almost couldn't pay my rent. The bag I wanted got sold to someone else. My friends invited me out, and I had to make excuses to decline. You've made me lose so much face. I turned a page in the report, my tone flat, almost nonchalant. Oh, what have you been through? Isn't it a good thing to experience the life of an ordinary international student? Or even just an ordinary young person who has to budget and live within their means? This is the real world, Chloe. Cut the crap. It's easy for you to talk. She sounded like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, instantly bristling. Her shriek was a bit piercing over the speaker. Let me tell you, Grace, don't get too smug. You turn my card back on right now and transfer the money you owe me. Or else, I'll make my brother divorce you. You believe me. My brother loves me the most, and my mom is on my side. You're an outsider, a parasite. You'll be kicked out of our Miller family sooner or later. When you're old and washed up, we'll see who wants you then." The word divorce, coming from this sister-in-law who did nothing but spend money and stir up trouble, was absurdly comical. In the past, that word might have filled me with panic, with the fear of losing a family I had built for years. But now, with the leverage I held and the reality I had seen, all I felt was a cold, mocking amusement. "Chloe," I said slowly to the air, my voice low but clear enough. "You don't seem to have grasped the situation yet. First, whether we divorce or not is between your brother and me. It will be decided based on the law, our assets, and our relationship. You don't get a say. Second, you probably have no idea about the current state of your brother's company, Apex Builders, do you? How much debt it has, how tight its cash flow is. Then again, you only care if he can send you money. I can tell you unequivocally that without me, it's a question whether Apex can survive even 3 months. Third, the only way you can be kicked out of the Miller family is if the Miller family still has enough money to support you living in a mansion in London, buying luxury goods, and spending lavishly. Do you think if your brother and I really get to the point of divorce and dividing assets given the current laws and the evidence I have, you'll still be able to get tens of thousands with a single phone call? Do you think the brother will be able to maintain their current standard of living?" The other end of the line went silent. A dead, suffocating silence. Only her heavy, rapid breathing from her agitation came through the line, clearly audible. I could imagine her expression, eyes wide, mouth agape, filled with disbelief and a creeping dread. My words were like a cold scalpel dissecting the cruel truth beneath their glamorous facade, their complete dependence on my support. I continued pouring a bucket of ice water on her already crumbling world. Do the math. Your designer bags, your luxury clothes, your fancy apartment, your constant parties and galas. Who's paying for all that? Do you really have no clue? Is it your brother whose own company is on the brink? Or is it your mother, whose monthly pension is less than $2,000? Without me, Grace Miller do. You think your wonderful brother and mother could give you even a tenth, no 1% of the life you have now? It would be a miracle if they could. So think carefully. Do you want to keep yelling at me and completely piss off your only source of funding? Or do you want to tuck your tail between your legs and start figuring out how to live your life from now on? And how you're going to explain to your brother and mother why you scared away the goose that lays the golden eggs? You, she stammered, her voice trembling and laced with tears, but she couldn't manage any more tough words. She was clearly furious and terrified, hit squarely in the most fatal and frightening spot. She was used to being imperious, and had never truly considered what would happen to her world if the money tap was turned off. "Don't make these pointless time-wasting calls again," I delivered my final ultimatum, my tone ice cold. "If you have the guts, then really convince your brother to come talk to me about divorce and dividing our assets. I'll be waiting. If you don't have the guts, then learn to shut up and figure out your own problems. Your good life ended the moment I hung up on you last time. Remember that." Completely ended. This time, before she could make another sound, I decisively pressed the end call button. And for good measure, I blocked her number. The world was quiet again. I could imagine her on the other side of the world in London, throwing her phone in a rage, breaking things frantically, calculating how many more days of her lavish lifestyle her savings could support, and desperately calling her brother and mother, crying and applying pressure. But none of that had anything to do with me anymore. Cutting off her support was just the first step, the most direct form of retaliation. I wanted her and the family that enabled her dependence on me to slowly and clearly experience what it means to go from extravagance to frugality, and what having it tough really means. The seeds of panic had been sown. Now it was time for them to take root, sprout, and torment them day and night. The unraveling. On the 7th day, after cutting off the allowance, the atmosphere at home was eerily calm. But beneath the silence, an undercurrent was churning. Leo continued to leave early and return late, avoiding me as much as possible. On the rare occasions we crossed paths, his eyes would dart away and he'd look like he wanted to say something, only to walk past in silence. My mother-in-law Sharon hadn't come over to cause a scene either, which I found unusual. It wasn't in her character to be this quiet. Sure enough, that afternoon, just as I returned from a client meeting and before I'd even changed out of my work clothes, the doorbell rang. It wasn't the furious, insistent ringing from before, but a hesitant, intermittent ding-dong. Ding-dong. I checked the security monitor. It was my mother-in-law. She stood outside, clutching her phone tightly, repeatedly glancing down at the screen. Her face wasn't angry, but a mixture of panic, worry, and suspicion. Her eyes darted around as if she had a guilty conscience. I opened the door. When she saw me, she forced a smile that was more unnatural than a grimace. Grace. Ah, you're back. It was rare for her to speak in such a placating tone. She even took the initiative to change into slippers, her movements a bit stiff. Yes, Sharon. Come in and sit. I stepped aside to let her in and close the door. She followed me timidly into the living room but didn't take her usual spot in the most comfortable armchair. Instead, she perched stiffly on the edge of a single sofa, her back ramrod straight, her hands still clutching her phone on her lap. I didn't speak first. I went to the kitchen, poured her a glass of warm water and placed it on the coffee table in front of her. Then I sat on the long sofa opposite her, watching her quietly, waiting for her to speak. She picked up the glass, brought it to her lips but didn't drink, then put it down again, her fingers nervously rubbing the smooth surface, making a faint squeaking sound. The living room was so quiet you could hear the tick-tock of the wall clock. Finally, as if she had summoned all her courage, she looked up at me, lowered her voice, and asked quickly, Grace, about Chloe. Have you been in contact with her these past few days, or has she said anything unusual to you? I looked at her, my expression calm. No. After our last call, I blocked her number. Sharon, what kind of unusual things are you referring to? It's just, in London, besides studying what kind of friends has she been making, has she met any strange people? My mother-in-law's voice was full of uncertainty and deep worry, her brow furrowed. Did she get into some kind of trouble? My mind stirred, but I kept my face impassive, instead showing a touch of appropriate confusion. Sharon, why are you suddenly asking this? Doesn't she FaceTime you and report in every day? Didn't she say she's always with her classmates, studying and attending proper academic events with just the occasional party? What kind of trouble could she get into? Oh, just stop beating around the bush with me. You know something, don't you? My mother-in-law was getting agitated. Her voice rose, then she seemed to catch herself and quickly lowered it again, leaning forward. Her voice was now a pleading whisper. Just now, about 2 hours ago, I got a call. It was a UK number, but not Chloe's usual one. It was a man. He had an English accent, but he spoke very stiff and serious. He asked if I was Miss Chloe Miller's mother, Mrs. Sharon Miller. She licked her dry lips and continued. I said yes. Then he said he had some serious information about Miss Chloe Miller that he needed to confirm with her guardian or immediate family. He asked if I could provide her father's or brother's contact information. I asked who he was, what organization he was, with the school, the police, what was wrong. He refused to say. He only said the matter was very important, involving legal and personal safety issues, and that he had to speak with her immediate male relatives. I was so scared, my heart was pounding. I didn't dare say much, just told him the men of the family weren't home and I'd get back to him, then I hung up. By now, the color had drained from her face. She gripped the tassels on the sofa armrest, her knuckles white. The more I thought about it, the more scared I got. I tried calling that number back to get some clarity, but it wouldn't go through. Just a dead tone. Grace, tell me the truth. Did Chloe get into some huge trouble over there? Is it related to you cutting off her allowance? Could she have been scammed? Or did she offend someone? Could she be in danger? I looked at the genuine terror on my mother-in-law's face. It was a mother's instinctual fear for her child's safety, transcending all her previous disdain and scheming. The vague suspicion in my mind began to solidify. It seemed the trouble Chloe had cooked up in London was coming to a head faster, more directly, and more dangerously than I had imagined. The other party was no longer content with extorting from Chloe. They were now reaching out to her family back home. I didn't answer her barrage of questions directly. Instead, I focused on a key point. Sharon, that man who called besides asking for your son or husband, did he mention anything specific? Or in the past 6 months, has Chloe ever mentioned meeting someone special like a very close boyfriend? Or did she suddenly become very too much, interested in certain investments or ways to make money? My question seemed to stun her. She shook her head blankly, her eyes growing more panicked. No, she didn't. She only ever told me her classmates were nice and that she was busy with her studies. A boyfriend? She never mentioned one to me. Every time I asked, she'd say her studies came first, and she wasn't thinking about that. Investing. She's just a student. What does she know about investing? Grace, you know something, don't you? You must know something. Tell me, please don't scare me. I gently pulled my wrist free from her unconscious grip and patted her cold hand, my voice calm to the point of being detached, but carrying a weight that could offer a sliver of stability. Sharon, don't scare yourself. Maybe it was just a wrong number or some new type of scam. However, my tone shifted, my gaze sharpening. Since they've called you directly, it seems Chloe really does have some things going on in London that we don't know about. And it might not be a small matter. Don't panic. And don't try to contact that number again. Most importantly, do not mention this call to Chloe. We don't want to alert her or make her more scared. Like a drowning person grasping at a lifeline, my mother-in-law nodded repeatedly. Okay, I won't say anything. I won't call. Then, what do we do now? I will handle it, I said, standing up my tone, leaving no room for doubt. You go home and act as if everything is normal. Don't show any signs of distress. I will inform you immediately if there's any news. Remember, until I contact you, do not answer any unfamiliar overseas calls, and do not give Chloe any more money if she asks. Leave everything to me. My mother-in-law looked at my calm and composed demeanor as if I had everything under control. She opened her mouth, seemingly wanting to ask more, but in the end, all her questions and fears melted into a dazed reliance. She nodded blankly, picked up her phone and bag, and left with unsteady steps. Once her unsettled figure disappeared into the elevator, I immediately turned back to the study, locked the door, and took out a different, rarely used personal phone. I dialed a number buried deep in my contacts, one I hadn't called in a long time. The phone rang 3 times before it was answered. A capable, crisp female voice with a slight British accent came through. Miss Miller, what a rare pleasure. Calling at this hour, is there an urgent matter? Jessica, sorry to bother you. I need you to run a check on someone in London. I need it fast and as detailed as possible. I gave her Chloe Miller's name, date of birth, possible phone numbers, and her known university information. Focus on her real social circle over the past year, especially the last 6 months. Spending records, bank statements, relationship status, and whether she's involved in any legal disputes, unusual debts, or has ties to any unsavory characters. Money is not an issue. I need the whole truth. Jessica Vance was a former international student I had helped by chance many years ago. She was decisive, highly competent, and now worked in high-end private investigation and corporate intelligence in the UK with a deep network of contacts. There was a moment of silence on her end, then a crisp reply. Understood, Miss Miller. The more detail, the better, prioritizing sensitive and dangerous items. Give me 3 days. I'll get you a preliminary report. Good. I'll be waiting for your news. Hanging up, I walked to the window and looked down at the people strolling leisurely in the community garden. The sun was out, everything looked peaceful, but I knew that beneath the calm surface, a dark tide was already surging. Chloe Miller. Just what kind of massive pit have you dug for yourself and for this family? The report. Money can solve many problems, and it can also uncover many deceptions, especially when you need to know the bloody truths some people try so desperately to hide from their families. Jessica's efficiency was, as expected, impeccable. On the evening of the 3rd day, an encrypted, compressed file arrived in my designated email inbox. I entered the complex password, unzipped it, and opened the report inside. It was detailed with photos and text all clearly organized. I read it page by page. Even though I was prepared, expecting that Chloe wouldn't be well-behaved abroad, the contents of the report still made me let out a cold, derisive snort. The so-called demanding studies at a prestigious university was a complete and utter lie, an excuse to placate her family. Chloe's attendance rate was pitifully low. Last semester, she had failed or missed the exams for several core courses. The university's academic affairs office had issued multiple written warnings, the most recent one being harshly worded, stating that if her attendance and grades did not improve significantly this semester, they would initiate procedures that could lead to her expulsion. The place she was renting was not the safe, convenient, and cost-effective student apartment she had told her family about. It was a luxury penthouse apartment in a prime location in Mayfair, with high-level security, panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows, and a private terrace. The monthly rent was a staggering £10,000, more than 3 times the rent of the student apartment I had been told about. Her spending records were even more shocking, painting a picture of decadence built on a mountain of money. Receipts from luxury brands like Hermes, Chanel, and Richard Mille were as common as snowflakes, with new purchases almost every week. Charges from 3 Michelin star restaurants, private members-only clubs, and even underground casinos were frequent. There were also large expenses for expensive liquor art pieces and vague transactions that were likely for drugs. Her transfer records showed that, besides frequently sending money to several fixed UK and European accounts, supposedly to her friends for joint investments or short-term loans, a new pattern had emerged in the last 6 months. Regular large sums of money were being sent to a personal account under the name William Thorne. The memo for these transfers sometimes read investment funds, sometimes loan, and other times were just ambiguous abbreviations. But the most crucial and chilling part of the report was about Chloe's romantic and social life. Jessica had highlighted this section in bold red font. For the past 8 months, Chloe had been in a close relationship with a British man named William Thorne. They presented themselves as a couple. On the surface, this man was dapper, running a small import-export company and a high-end car dealership. However, cross-referencing information from multiple sources revealed a complex background. He had deep tangled connections to several local organized crime syndicates in London, particularly those involved in loan sharking and money laundering. He had a terrible reputation. The police had questioned him in connection with several cases of financial disputes and violent threats, but all were dropped due to insufficient evidence or witnesses changing their stories. The report included several candid photos. The man in the pictures was around 30, impeccably dressed, with an arrogant smile, his arm around Chloe as they entered various lavish venues. Chloe, in turn, had a look of adoration and pride on her face. At the end of the report, Jessica added a professional summary. Miss Miller, based on the available information, it is highly likely that your sister-in-law, Miss Chloe Miller, is not merely a spendthrift. She has probably been intentionally targeted and controlled by this William Thorne, becoming his prey. Her spending habits and social circle have been deliberately guided to a level far beyond her own means, creating a severe financial dependency. It appears she has now become one of William Thorne's ATMs, and may even be embroiled in his illicit activities, such as money laundering, or being used as some form of collateral. The mysterious phone call your family received is almost certainly related to William Thorne or the forces behind him. It could be a debt collection tactic or a more serious threat. Do you require me to conduct a deeper investigation into William Thorne and his associates? The risk level will increase accordingly. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, letting the information from the report swirl and connect in my mind. The luxury apartment, the designer goods, the casino, the loan shark boyfriend, the police record, the mysterious threatening phone call, everything now had a logical and utterly terrible explanation. Chloe wasn't studying abroad. She was using my money to build a gilded, decadent fantasy for herself, and she had willingly walked into a meticulously designed trap, becoming a fish on someone else's chopping block, while leading the trouble right back to her. Family, I replied to Jessica, continue the deep dive on William Thorne. I need to know his recent financial situation, which syndicates he's closely involved with, and the specific methods he might be using to control or threaten Chloe. Be safe. I'll double your fee. Report any new developments immediately. I closed the laptop. The study was lit only by a single desk lamp, casting the room in a dim glow. A clear, cold plan was forming in my mind. This was more serious than I had thought. It wasn't just immaturity and overspending anymore. It involved security risks and flirted with the edge of the law. The phone call my mother-in-law received was not the end. It was the beginning. Just as I was contemplating my next move and how to share this damning report with the people who needed to see it, there was a soft knock on the study door. Leo stood outside, looking even worse than a few days ago. His eyes were bloodshot, he hadn't shaved, and he exuded an air of exhaustion and anxiety. When he saw me sitting at the desk, he hesitated as if wanting to turn and leave, but ultimately came in, closing the door behind him. His voice was harsh, laced with an undisguisable frustration. Mom came to see you again this afternoon, didn't she? She's been acting strange and secretive ever since she got back, completely distracted. She won't say what's wrong, just that you told her not to worry. Is something really wrong with Chloe? So he knew about the call after all. He had sensed something was off from his mother's abnormal behavior. I looked at him, the man who was once my husband, now overwhelmed by his sister's mess, resentful of me, yet forced to rely on me. A deep sense of weariness washed over me. Not hate, not love, just a profound fatigue with this marriage so entangled with interests, schemes, and a pile of rotten affairs. Leo, I said, gesturing to the chair opposite my desk. Sit down. We need to talk. About your sister, Chloe. I've found some things out. I think it's necessary. In fact, you must know the whole truth now. Leo looked at me suspiciously, his gaze flicking to my closed laptop with a flash of unease. He eventually sat down, his body tense, his hands clasped tightly on his knees like a prisoner awaiting his final sentence. I didn't waste words. I simply took the printed report from beside me, an edited version that removed the most sensitive information, but kept the core facts, and pushed it across the desk to him. Read this yourself. We'll talk after you're done. My voice sounded exceptionally clear and exceptionally cold in the quiet room. The reckoning. Leo picked up the few thin sheets of paper, his brow furrowed with a hint of skepticism, as if he thought I was exaggerating again. But as he read on, his frown deepened and the color began to drain from his face, bit by bit. When he reached the part about her attendance and the academic warnings, his head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. This is impossible. Chloe, every time we FaceTime, she says her studies are so demanding that her professors really value her. She even showed me a paper she wrote. And you believed her, I countered. Have you ever seen her official transcript when you FaceTime? Has she ever shown you the full view of her so-called student apartment beyond the one carefully arranged corner? Or every time she cried about being broke and needing money for study materials? Did you just choose to ignore the pictures on her social media, where the background was a private yacht or a high-end gala? My rapid-fire questions were calm but sharp. Leo was left speechless, his face burning as if he'd been slapped. He lowered his head, his fingers trembling slightly as he continued to read. When he saw the £10,000 monthly rent for the luxury apartment and the pages-long list of luxury purchases, he sucked in a sharp breath. His hand clenched so tightly that the paper crinkled loudly. This apartment, all these bags, these watches. How could she? Because someone was giving her a constant stream of money, never asking what it was for, never setting a limit. I finished for him coldly. Leo's face turned another shade paler. He quickly flipped to the end. When he saw the brief description of her boyfriend William Thorne, especially the bolded words ties to organized crime and police record, his hand shook violently. The papers, as if scalding hot, slipped from his grasp and fluttered to the floor. What does this mean? Leo's voice shot up, filled with uncontrollable horror and rage. He jumped to his feet, his eyes locked on me. How could she know someone like this? A gangster. A loan shark. Is she insane? I don't know if she's insane, but she's definitely a fool, I said. I bent down and picked up the scattered papers one by one, my movements calm and unhurried. I straightened them and placed them back on the desk. The report indicates she's been with this William Thorne for at least 8 months. They're very close. These 8 months also coincide with the period her spending skyrocketed, and the frequency and amount of money she asked from me increased dramatically. By a rough estimate, she took over $180,000 from me during this time. At least $120,000 of that flowed to William Thorne, or was spent because of him. The mysterious phone call your mother received. The caller refused to identify himself, but insisted on speaking to a man in the family. That's a classic move for these loan sharks or mob-affiliated groups. They think female family members are easy to scare, but when it comes to making decisions and negotiating terms, especially paying back money, they need to talk to a man. Leo looked as if all the strength had been sucked out of him. He collapsed back into the chair, burying his face in his hands, tugging at his hair in anguish. His voice, muffled by his fingers, was choked with sobs. How did it come to this? How did she become like this? I always thought. I thought she was just spoiled, a bit vain, and liked to spend money. I even used to blame you for not being generous enough with her. His voice broke and his shoulders shook violently. Watching this man, who had always presented himself as a successful businessman and the pillar of the family, now so vulnerable and broken before me, I felt no sympathy or satisfaction. I was just a frozen lake reflecting his pathetic state. He should have seen this coming. Every time he gave her money without question, every time he downplayed Chloe's vicious words, every time he asked me to compromise for the bigger picture, he was fertilizing the bitter fruit he was tasting today. Leo, this is not the time for self-blame and regret, I stated calmly, my voice as precise and cold as a scalpel. The problem is that they've bypassed Chloe and called the house directly, called your mother's phone. What does that mean? It means Chloe can no longer meet their demands, or they feel they can't squeeze any more out of her. So they're targeting her family, especially family members who might have more money. Their goal is clear money. And probably a lot of it. It might not even be just about the money. Leo's head shot up, his eyes red and filled with panic and helplessness. Then, what do we do now? Police, yes, call the police. Call the police in the UK, have them arrest that bastard and protect Chloe. Call the police. On what grounds? How, I asked, my logic almost cruel in its clarity. International police reports are complicated. Right now, all we have is evidence of abnormal spending, suspicious associations, and one anonymous threatening phone call. We have no proof of physical harm, no clear kidnapping or ransom demand. The caller didn't give any specific information, not even an identity. What would we tell the police? My sister might have a bad boyfriend, might owe some money, and someone might have called to scare her mother. Do you think the London police would even open a case? And even if they did, how efficient would they be? What if it just tips them off? What if they get desperate and actually do something to harm Chloe? My series of questions left Leo speechless. The small flame of hope he had just ignited was instantly extinguished and his face grew even paler. He was finally truly realizing that his sister hadn't gotten into some minor trouble but a complete disaster involving potential mob ties, dirty tactics, and a reach that extended all the way back to the US. This was a mess that couldn't be solved with typical family dispute methods. So we just watch. Wait for them to call again and extort us. Leo's voice trembled with despair. Of course not. Seeing his defeated state, I softened my tone slightly, but it remained firm. Since they made contact, it means they want something. And they either feel the time is right or they're getting desperate. If we just wait passively, we'll only lose more ground. What we need to do is turn this situation around, prepare ourselves, and get on the same page. We can't be like before, letting Chloe lie and deceive us while we foolishly and unconditionally fill the holes she digs. This bottomless pit must be sealed and it must be dealt with at the source. Otherwise, today, it's a mysterious phone call. Next time, it might not be a call, but you or mom or me receiving something much more terrifying. My words sent a shiver down Leo's spine, and the last traces of color drained from his face. The way he looked at me for the first time was completely devoid of a husband's authority or a man's pride. All that was left was total reliance and a humble plea. Grace, then, what should we do? I'll listen to you. This time, I'll really listen to whatever you say. As long as we can get Chloe back safely, I'll do anything. Hearing his tear-choked, I'll do anything, I still felt no ripples in my heart. He had brought this on himself. But at this point, anger and blame were meaningless. Solving the problem and controlling the damage were what mattered. First, I said, standing up and beginning to lay out the plan, bring your mother here. Explain the basic situation to her in a way she can handle. Emphasize that Chloe might be in danger. Make her stay calm, not panic, and most importantly, not give Chloe any more money or information privately. Second, you try to contact Chloe. Don't question her, don't argue. Show concern, try to get information from her. See what her situation is, if she's safe, if her freedom is restricted, if that William Thorne is with her. Be tactful, don't scare her, and don't let on that we know about her boyfriend. Lastly, I walked to the window and looked out at the dark night, my gaze sharp. We wait. We wait for that call or similar contact to come to us again. In the meantime, I will have my people in the UK continue their investigation to give us more leverage. Remember, from this moment on, the three of us must be a united front. All actions will be coordinated by me. Can you do that? Leo nodded frantically like a drowning man clinging to a lifeline. Yes, I can. I'll go get Mom right now. He stumbled to his feet, swaying slightly, as if his legs were weak, and hurried out of the study. I looked at the closed door and slowly exhaled. The first step, shock and awe and reclaiming control, was complete. Next, it was time to face the real wolves outside. Chloe Miller, look what you've dragged the entire family into. The call. My mother-in-law was brought over by Leo around 9 p.m. Her eyes were swollen and red like peaches. She had clearly been crying alone for a long time. When she saw me, her lips moved, but all her former bluster was gone, replaced by a timid, awkward demeanor. Grace, she mumbled. I nodded and gestured for her to sit. The three of us sat in the living room, forming a strange triangle. The light from the huge crystal chandelier was bright but cold, illuminating every subtle expression on our faces. The atmosphere was so heavy you could wring water from it. I was about to lay out the core details from Jessica's report, especially the safety risks, in a calm but firm manner. But before I could speak, my mother-in-law's phone, sitting on the glass coffee table, began to vibrate violently. The buzzing sound was piercingly loud in the dead-silent room. Another unknown number from the UK. The prefix was different from the last one, but it radiated the same ominous feeling. All three of us snapped our gazes to the vibrating phone as if drawn by a magnet. The screen's light pulsed in the dim living room. My mother-in-law flinched as if she'd been burned, yanking her hand back and looking at me, then at Leo for help, her lips trembling, too scared to answer. I took a deep breath, suppressing the flicker of anxiety that shot through me, and gave Leo a look. He understood. His Adam's apple bobbed. He reached for his mother's phone, his fingers white from the pressure. He steadied himself, glanced at the number, then looked at me. With my silent nod of approval, he pressed the answer key and immediately turned on the speaker. Hello, Leo's voice was dry, trying to stay calm. Good evening. May I ask if this is Mrs. Sharon Miller, mother of Miss Chloe Miller? A man's voice came through the phone. He had a perfectly crisp, educated British accent, but his tone was so polite it was robotic, exuding a cold, detached professionalism that was nothing like a typical scam call. Leo glanced at me. I nodded slightly. He cleared his throat and replied, "I am her brother, Leo Miller. My mother is right here, but she isn't feeling well. You can speak with me directly." "Mr. Miller, good evening," the man said, his tone unchanging. "My name is Michael Evans. I am a licensed private investigator currently working in London. I have been hired by a client to conduct some lawful inquiries into Miss Chloe Miller's recent financial situation, social connections, and certain specific activities." A private investigator. The three of us exchanged shocked glances. This was more formal and more troublesome than we'd imagined. "Who hired you? Who is your client? What's their objective?" Leo demanded, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "I apologize, Mr. Miller, but my client's identity is a professional confidence. I am not at liberty to disclose it." Michael Evans' voice remained steady like he was reading a report. "However, based on my findings, I have been instructed by my client to inform Miss Miller's immediate family of some highly concerning situations." He paused as if choosing his words carefully, then continued in that same calm, cruel tone. "Our investigation shows that Miss Chloe Miller has recently borrowed multiple large sums of money from my client and their associates under her own name, with the total principal exceeding £500,000. At the time of the loans, she provided certain asset certificates as collateral, some of which involved what she claimed to be shares in a family business in the United States, as well as some real estate under her name. However, upon verification, this collateral was either grossly overvalued or its ownership is highly questionable in some cases. It does not belong to her at all. My client now has serious and reasonable doubts about her ability to repay this debt, and about Miss Miller's integrity at the time of borrowing. £500,000. That was over $600,000. My mother-in-law gasped, her body swaying as if she might slide off the sofa. Her face turned deathly pale as she clutched her chest, struggling to breathe. Leo was also stunned, the hand holding the phone trembling violently, his eyes wide as he tried to process the astronomical figure. Michael Evans seemed to expect this reaction. His voice continued without a hint of emotion as he dropped an even bigger bombshell. "Furthermore, during the investigation, I discovered that Miss Miller has been associating very closely with certain individuals in London who have ties to organized crime, including her current live-in boyfriend, a Mr. William Thorne. There are indications that a portion of her borrowed funds were funneled by Mr. Thorne into illegal high-risk online betting activities with catastrophic losses. It is highly likely she is now deeply mired in a debt trap, and due to the background of her associates, her personal safety is facing a genuine and significant potential threat." Are you telling the truth? Do you have proof?" Leo's voice was shattered, clinging to a final shred of desperate hope. "Mr. Miller, I am a professional. My conclusions are based on a verifiable chain of evidence. Due to professional ethics and my client agreement, I cannot provide you with all the original evidence. However, I can select certain key pieces of information that do not compromise my client's core privacy and send them via encrypted means to this phone or a secure email you designate for your verification." Michael Evans's tone was still level, but it carried an authority that could not be questioned. He paused, his tone shifting slightly, as if the carefully laid trap was finally revealing its bait. "Additionally, based on my comprehensive investigation, Miss Miller's primary source of funding for her high-consumption lifestyle over the past 2 years points directly to a Miss Grace Miller in the United States, that is your wife. My client has also taken full note of this. He believes that given Miss Miller's current inability to repay perhaps the true reliable repayment capacity, as well as the moral responsibility for this matter, should be sought from Miss Grace Miller. This is the main reason I am contacting you today, and hoping to communicate with a family member who can make decisions." There it was. The spear was now aimed squarely at me. The other party hadn't just dug up all of Chloe's dirt. They had a clear picture of my existence and my role. This wasn't a simple debt collection. It was a targeted, precise application of pressure and a test of the waters. My mother-in-law and Leo both whipped their heads around to look at me, their expressions a chaotic mix. There was fear of the massive debt shock at Chloe's dangerous entanglement and confusion that it had all escalated so far. But deeper, there was also a hidden habitual expectation that even they might not have recognized the expectation that I would once again, as I had countless times before, step up, pull out my money, and solve this enormous problem. Fill this gaping hole. I met their gazes filled with both terror and hope, and spoke clearly and calmly into the speakerphone on the coffee table. Mr. Evans, this is Grace Miller. Regarding the so-called debt owed by Miss Chloe Miller that you mentioned, I need to clarify a few points. Please relay them to your client. First, besides our legal in-law relationship, there is no form of joint debt guarantee or joint liability between Miss Chloe Miller and myself. She is a fully competent adult. The consequences of her personal borrowing activities should be borne entirely by her. Second, I have recently formally and permanently ceased all financial support to Miss Chloe Miller. The financial transactions between us have been clearly documented and unilaterally terminated. Third, any of my personal assets or interests that she claimed as collateral or guarantee when borrowing from your client were her own fraudulent acts. They have absolutely no legal validity. I was completely unaware of this and will absolutely not acknowledge it. If your client has any issue with this or feels his interests have been harmed, I suggest he immediately seek resolution through formal legal channels in the UK or the US. Or, he can go directly to the person who signed the loan documents and made the false statements, Miss Chloe Miller herself. I have nothing to do with this matter. My voice wasn't loud, but each word landed like a frozen pearl, clear, firm, and with no room for negotiation. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Michael Evans's voice returned, seemingly unsurprised, even tinged with an I told you so coolness. I understand, Miss Miller. Thank you for your clear statement. I will relay your position to my client completely and accurately. However, his tone shifted, carrying a professional cold warning given Miss Chloe Miller's current situation, the high debt her association with dangerous individuals, and the potential physical threat. From my personal perspective as an observer, I would advise that as her family, you should seriously consider sending a responsible and decisive representative to the UK as soon as possible to handle this matter in person and to communicate directly with the relevant parties. Otherwise, the situation could, due to a lack of effective intervention, rapidly develop in a more uncontrollable and even more dangerous direction. My contact information will be sent to this phone via text shortly. If you decide to take action or need to communicate any progress, you can contact me. I wish you a good evening. Click. The line went dead. The living room fell into a silence even more oppressive and suffocating than before. The only sounds were my mother-in-law's ragged, choked sobs and the indifferent ticking of the wall clock. A few seconds later, with a wail, my mother-in-law finally broke down under the successive blows, letting out a flood of unrestrained sobs, tears, and snot streaming down her face. $600, 000. And those mobsters, my Chloe? How could she be so foolish? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? This is going to be the death of me. Leo was ashen-faced like a soulless clay statue, sitting there, frozen, his head in his hands, curled up in a ball, silent as if completely crushed by the massive number and the words physical threat. I sat on the sofa opposite them, my back straight, my gaze calm, watching their complete and utter breakdown. One sentence from the other end of the line had left my entire in-law family stunned and in despair. And the root of all this absurd, dangerous disaster was the bitter fruit of their years of boundless spoiling indulgence and their use of me as an ATM and a shield. Now it was their turn to taste this bitter, expensive, and potentially fatal fruit themselves. The tide of panic had already drowned them, and the rope that could pull them ashore was in my hands. But this time, if they wanted me to pay unconditionally again, it was absolutely impossible. The ultimatum. My mother-in-law's cries were like a broken dam, a torrent that couldn't be stopped. Her sobs were heart-wrenching, not just because of the terrifying debt, but because of the primal fear for her daughter's life brought on by words like organized crime and physical threat. As she cried, her blame as usual turned to me. She lifted her tear-streaked face, a trembling finger pointing at me, her voice shrill and broken. "It's all your fault, Grace. It's all your fault. If you had just been stricter with her, not let her spend so much money, she would never have borrowed from these loan sharks. She would never have gotten mixed up with those good-for-nothing, damnable people. Now look, such a huge mess. If anything happens to her, I don't want to live either. I don't want to live." Leo, agitated by his mother's hysterical crying and accusations, snapped out of his stupor. A wave of frustration and despair washed over him. He shot his head up, his eyes bloodshot, and roared at his mother. "Mom, what's the use of saying all this now? Back then, every time Chloe wanted money for this or that, weren't you the one who always backed her up saying girls need to be raised with money that our Miller family could afford it? Now that there's trouble, all you know is how to blame others, blame Grace. Did Grace not try to control her? Did she not try to reason with her? Did you or Chloe ever listen?" My mother-in-law was stunned by her son's unprecedentedly harsh rebuke. Her sobs caught in her throat as she stared at her usually dutiful son in disbelief. A sense of betrayal and complete helplessness washed over her, and she began to cry even more heartbrokenly. You're yelling at me. You've gotten so tough now, haven't you? It's all my fault, is it? I'm just an old woman. What do I know? Would I ever harm my own daughter? It's you two. You, the brother and sister-in-law, you didn't raise her right. You didn't watch over her. And now you're blaming me. Why is my life so miserable? Seeing the situation devolving into a pointless cycle of blame, I spoke coldly. My voice wasn't loud, but it was like a pair of icy scissors instantly cutting through their emotional outburst. Will arguing about who's right and who's wrong solve the $600,000 debt, or will it magically pull Chloe Miller safely out of a potentially life-threatening situation? They both fell silent. My mother-in-law's sobs turned into suppressed whimpers, and Leo buried his head in his hands again in agony. Tears still welled in my mother-in-law's eyes, but her gaze towards me now held a deep-seated habitual reliance and a desperate plea. Then, what do we do now? We can't just abandon Chloe, can we? She's my own flesh and blood. Hurry up and think of something. You're well-connected. You have resources. Just take out the money and pay off the debt. We can't afford to mess with those mobsters, those desperate criminals. Pay. To make the problem go away. Just pay them. Money again. Even at a time like this, her first instinct, her gut reaction was still for me to pay up and fix it as if I were a bottomless gold mine or a tool specifically designed to clean up their family's messes. Leo didn't speak, but he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a complex plea and a heavy, unspoken moral pressure. It was a look that screamed, "You can't just stand by and watch her die, can you?" I met their gazes, a mixture of fear, dependence, and entitlement, and slowly, firmly shook my head. Sharon. Leo. Listen to me carefully. This is not a problem that can be solved simply by throwing money at it. In fact, throwing money at it might be the worst possible choice. First, the debt is huge. The other party is clearly a professional loan shark, possibly a criminal organization. The interest rates are astronomical. If we pay the $600,000 principal today, they could demand another $1 million tomorrow, in a breach of contract fee, late fees, or emotional distress damages. It's a bottomless pit that can never be filled. If we pay this time, they'll only be more aggressive next time. Second, Chloe herself is deeply entangled, completely infatuated with that William Thorne. If she doesn't wake up, if she doesn't cooperate and completely sever ties with that environment and those people, even if we pay off this debt, she'll just be tricked into borrowing again and digging an even bigger, more fatal hole. It's treating the symptom, not the cause. It would be a waste of effort and could even harm her more. Third, I paused my gaze, sweeping over their instantly paling faces, speaking each word with resounding force. My money was earned by me through early mornings and late nights, through business dinners and drinks, through taking risks. It didn't fall from the sky. And it certainly wasn't earned to fill a giant black hole dug by stupidity, vanity, greed, and a con man. Especially when the person in that black hole has spent the last 2 years insulting, cursing, and belittling me like an enemy. I have no obligation and no reason to be the fool who pays for this. My mother-in-law grew desperate, struggling to stand. So, you're just going to watch your sister-in-law die. Grace is your heart made of stone. She's your husband's own sister. We're family. It is precisely because she is legally still my husband's sister that I am sitting here with you, analyzing the situation and discussing a solution instead of directly filing a police report and issuing a public statement completely, disavowing her and her debts. My tone suddenly hardened, carrying an authority that could not be questioned. But if you think my stone heart means I will no longer mindlessly throw money away to feed her ego and satisfy criminals' greed, then I'm sorry. I'll own that. I have a stone heart. Seeing them stunned into silence by my sudden show of force, I slowed my pace, but my words remained clear and powerful. There are many ways to solve this problem, but foolishly throwing money at it is not one of them. That will only make things worse and put all of us in a more passive and dangerous position. What we need to do now is calm down and use our heads, not our emotions and tears, to solve this. Leo looked as if the last of his strength had been drained. He slumped on the sofa, his voice hoarse and desperate. Then, what is the solution? We can't just do nothing. I can't do that. Of course we'll do something, I said resolute. But not the way you're thinking, like fools delivering cash. What we need to do is go to the UK and handle this mess in person. But we are not going there to deliver money and beg for mercy. We are going to solve the problem. That includes clarifying the true nature and legality of the debt, assessing the actual risk Chloe is facing, and if necessary, seeking formal legal help or even asking for consular protection from the U.S. Embassy. Most importantly, we need to drag Chloe out of that swamp, sever all her ties with that environment and those people, and bring her back. I looked at their eyes where a flicker of hope had been rekindled but was still mixed with confusion. But this requires a few things. It requires Chloe's cooperation, even if it's forced. It requires both of your complete support and absolute trust. And throughout the entire process, you must follow my arrangements and command completely. If you can't do that, or if you hesitate or try to interfere halfway through, then I can't help you either. You can try to raise the $600,000 yourselves, go to the UK yourselves, and face those mobsters to save your daughter and sister. I once again laid the choice clearly before them. But this time, there was no easy path. One was a difficult, uncertain road that was likely the only way out, led by me. The other was a dead end that they were completely incapable of handling on their own. My mother-in-law opened her mouth, her face, a mess of tears and snot, about to say something about the danger, about being in a foreign country. But looking at my expression and Leo's, especially the complete reliance and surrender in his eyes, she ultimately swallowed her objections. She just slumped back, muttering, "Go to London. We don't know anything. It's so dangerous. What if they've already taken Chloe?" Leo struggled for what felt like an eternity, the muscles in his face twitching. Finally, as if summoning all his strength, he gave a slow, heavy nod. He looked at me, his eyes filled with exhaustion, shame, and complete surrender. "Grace, you're right. We were wrong before. This time, we'll listen to you." "When? When do we leave? What do we need to prepare?" "Not yet," I said, glancing at the clock on the wall. "First, I need to contact that Michael Evans, or use other channels to get more information about his client, the debt details, and Chloe's current situation. We need as much intelligence as possible to make a plan. In the meantime, Leo, book the tickets." Leo nodded immediately. "Okay." "No," I cut him off, my tone absolute. "Book one ticket for me. Business class, the earliest possible flight." "What? You're going alone, Leo?" and my mother-in-law cried out in unison. My mother-in-law even forgot to cry. "Yes, I'm going alone." I stood up, looking down at them, my presence commanding the room. "More people will be useless, a liability even. They could even become more leverage for the other side to use against us. I'm going to handle a problem, to negotiate and maneuver and use whatever means necessary to resolve this. I'm not going on a vacation or a family visit, and I'm certainly not going to deliver a busload of hostages. You two stay here, keep your phones on 24/7 and wait for my news. Without my permission, you are not to contact Chloe again, and you are not to send her a single cent. Can you do that?" Leo looked at this wife who seemed to have been completely transformed, calm, formidable, and unnervingly unfamiliar. He opened his mouth, but in the end, all his words turned into a single dry syllable. "Yes. You have to be careful." My mother-in-law was completely speechless, just staring at me blankly, her expression a maelstrom of emotions. I said no more. I turned and walked towards the study. I knew that from this moment on, the power and decision-making authority in this family had completely and irrevocably shifted to me. The upcoming trip to the UK would not just be a reckoning for Chloe. It would be a test of my own abilities, and a final clean break with the twisted dynamics of this family. The contract. The day before I left for the UK, I summoned Leo and my mother-in-law to the study. The atmosphere was heavy. The curtains were half drawn, leaving the room in a dim light. My mother-in-law's eyes were still swollen, but she had cried so much there were few tears left. She just sat there numbly, unconsciously twisting a crumpled handkerchief in her hands. Leo looked ashen and gaunt, unshaven, with deep bags under his eyes. He looked as if he'd aged a decade overnight, his spine seemingly gone. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. I opened my desk drawer, took out 2 crisply printed documents, and placed them on the desk in front of them, pushing them forward. "This is a post-nuptial agreement my lawyer drew up overnight," I said, getting straight to the point. My voice was exceptionally clear in the quiet study. "Before I go to London to handle this situation with Chloe, some things need to be said, and some things need to be put down in black and white to avoid future trouble and to ensure we can truly work together. Read it carefully. You can ask if there's anything you don't understand." Leo swallowed hard and reached for one copy. My mother-in-law leaned over with a trembling hand to look. The terms of the agreement were clear, cold, and devoid of any sentimental pretense. 1. Transfer of financial power of attorney effective. Immediately upon signing, Party A, Grace Miller, is granted durable power of attorney over all joint marital assets, the management, control, and disposal rights of all assets under the names of Party A and Party B. Leo Miller, including but not limited to all shares of Apex Builders and Aura Designs, all real estate bank deposits, stocks, funds, and all other investment assets shall be under the sole discretion of Party B retains the right to be informed, but any use, pledge, or transfer of assets regardless of the amount requires the written consent and signature of Party A to be executed. 2. Cessation of financial responsibility for Chloe Miller. Effective immediately upon signing, all future living, educational, medical debt-related, and any other expenses of Miss Chloe Miller shall have no legal or moral connection to Party A Grace Miller. Said responsibilities shall be borne solely by Party B Leo Miller and Party C Sharon Miller Mother. Party A is under no obligation to provide any form of direct or indirect financial support. Sen. Authorization for handling the London incident. All expenses incurred in handling the Chloe Miller-related incident in London, including, but not limited to, travel accommodation, investigation, legal fees, and possible debt settlement, shall be paid by Party A from the joint assets described in Article 1. Party A shall have absolute and exclusive autonomous decision-making authority in handling the incident. Party B and Party C shall not interfere, question, or subsequently blame Party A in any form or for any reason. 4. Post-return arrangement for Chloe Miller. Upon resolution of the incident, Chloe Miller must return to the United States immediately. Party B and Party C will be responsible for her daily life and strict supervision. All consequences arising from her future actions shall be borne by herself, Party B and Party C, and are unrelated to Party A Grace Miller. Party A reserves the right to require Chloe Miller to sign relevant guarantee documents. As Leo read, his fingers began to tremble uncontrollably, the paper rustling softly. My mother-in-law shrieked, her voice hoarse and sharp. What is this? This is a slave contract. Grace, are you trying to drive us to our deaths? All the family assets go to you. What are we supposed to do then? Live on the streets. Apex Builders is Leo's life's work. You're taking that. 2. Do you have any conscience left? I looked at her face, flushed red again with agitation, my tone unchanged. Sharon, you've misunderstood. This grants me financial power of attorney to create a firewall to prevent anyone from embezzling family funds without my consent to fill a bottomless pit again. As for your living expenses, including your Social Security and Leo's daily spending, I will transfer a sufficient amount to your respective accounts monthly. It will only be more regular and on time than before, not a penny less. But any large expenditure beyond basic living costs must be approved by me. As for Apex Builders, I turned my gaze to the pale-faced Leo. I will, as a shareholder and creditor, inject emergency capital to help you get through the current payment crisis and avoid bankruptcy. But the condition is that the company's CFO must be replaced by someone I trust. All cash flow must be transparent, and I must be informed of all major decisions. This isn't a takeover, Leo. This is damage control. It's formalizing management. And it's preventing your life's work from collapsing completely due to another blind decision or family burden. You know the real state of Apex better than I do. I looked back at my mother-in-law, my tone hardening. If you find these arrangements unacceptable, fine. We have another option. I paused, my gaze sweeping over them both. Leo, we can go to our lawyers tomorrow and file for a formal divorce. After the divorce, we will divide all marital assets according to the law. Once the division is complete, your company, your income, you can subsidize your sister or your mother however you want. I won't have a single complaint. I won't even look back. But my company, my money, my resources will from that moment on have absolutely no connection to your Miller family. You can figure out how to go to London, save your sister, and deal with that $600,000 debt and the mobsters yourself. 2 paths in black and white. You choose. Leo's face turned a deathly white, a fine sheen of cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. Divorce. Right now, his company was on the brink of collapse. His sister was in a life-or-death situation, and his mother was useless besides crying. Divorced without any of my financial or networking support, what would he use to fix this mess? He knew better than anyone that the only person who could save Chloe and possibly his company was me and the resources at my disposal. The agreement, though harsh, at least saved the company, secured his mother's basic living and gave him a glimmer of hope for solving his sister's problem. He closed his eyes in agony, his body swaying as if under immense pressure. After a long moment, he opened them. They were bloodshot and filled with a humiliating, complete surrender. He picked up the pen I had ready, his fingers trembling so much he could barely hold it. His voice was hoarse, as broken as an old bellows. I'll sign. Leo, you can't sign that. You're selling the whole family to her. My mother-in-law lunged forward to grab the pen, tears streaming down her face again. Mom Leo violently shook her off, letting out a desperate roar, his eyes a furious red. If I don't sign, do you have a way to save Chloe? Do you have a way to keep the company from going bankrupt? Do you have $600,000 to pay off the debt? If I sign, at least this family still exists in name. Chloe might still have a chance to come back. We won't end up on the streets. Wake up! My mother-in-law was stunned by his unprecedentedly harsh and desperate shouts. She stared blankly at her son, then at my cold, merciless face. She finally realized the battle was lost. They had no more bargaining chips. She collapsed back into her chair, covering her face and starting to sob again. But this time her cries were filled more with resignation, helplessness, and a deep, gut-wrenching regret. Leo didn't look at her. As if using all the strength he had left in his life, he signed his name on both copies of the agreement in the space for Party B. His handwriting was shaky and heavy. I pushed one copy to the still sobbing mother-in-law. Sharon, as Party C, the witness you also need to sign. She was trembling like a leaf in an autumn wind. She looked up, her tear-filled eyes glancing at me, then at her son's desolate face. Finally, with a trembling hand, she took the pen and scrawled an even shakier Sharon Miller next to Leo's name. I took back the 2 signed agreements, carefully checked the signatures, then signed my own name in the space for Party A. Once that was done, I locked one copy in the study's safe and handed the other to Leo. You keep this. The agreement is now in effect. Leo took it mechanically, not even looking at it, and shoved it into his pocket. He looked like a man whose soul had been hollowed out. My flight is early tomorrow morning, direct to Heathrow, I said, my tone a bit softer, but still carrying an undeniable command. You two wait for my news at home. Remember the terms of the agreement. Do not contact Chloe without my instruction. And do not listen to a single word she says about money or her crying pleas. Everything waits until I get there and assess the situation. Leo nodded heavily, looking as if he'd aged another 10 years, his posture stooped. My mother-in-law just kept her head down and whimpered, saying nothing more. I looked at them, one lost and soulless, the other filled with regret, but I felt no sense of victory. Just a quiet finality and a faint mocking irony. My battle was about to begin in a foreign land. And these 2 pieces at home, once so troublesome but now defanged, were no longer a concern. A huge, dangerous mess and a reckless sister-in-law who was probably still hoping for a lucky break were waiting for me to clean up in London. London's weather was just as cold and damp as I had expected. A low-hanging, pale gray sky drizzled intermittently, the air filled with a cool, detached atmosphere. I didn't notify Chloe. Under Jessica's meticulous arrangements, I checked into a boutique hotel in Knightsbridge with tight security and excellent privacy. After settling in, I met with the private investigator Michael Evans in a discreet meeting room at the hotel. He was even more capable than I had imagined. Around 40, dressed in a well-fitted dark suit without a tie, his demeanor was proper, his eyes sharp and cautious, reflecting the vigilance of someone who had spent years navigating gray areas. I handed him the formally signed letter of authorization and paid a hefty retainer, officially hiring him as my legal and intelligence consultant for this matter in the UK. In return, I received the more detailed and more alarming information he had on Chloe's debt and William Thorne. The situation was indeed 10 times worse than the brief description over the phone. The creditor wasn't a simple lending company, but a peripheral branch of an organized crime syndicate that operated under the guise of an investment consultancy. William Thorne was nothing more than a catcher and enforcer, on the syndicate's fringes, specializing in targeting wealthy, spoiled, vain, and naive international students like Chloe. He used romance displays of wealth and access to a high-end social circle as bait, luring them into spending far beyond their means, then guiding them to borrow from the syndicate and further tricking them into illegal online gambling. The debt had snowballed. I didn't hesitate. I had Michael Evans acting as Miss Grace Miller's fully authorized legal representative arrange a meeting through an intermediary with the mid-level boss in charge of Chloe's debt, a man nicknamed Vinny the Scar. The meeting was held in a private room in the back of a seedy pub in the East End. The room was dim and smelled of stale smoke. Vinny the Scar lived up to his name, with a gruesome old scar running from his eyebrow to the corner of his mouth. His eyes were vicious. He was flanked by 2 silent but muscular and menacing-looking men. I sat down directly opposite him. Michael Evans stood half a step behind me, holding a briefcase. I have been fully briefed on Chloe Miller's debt by her family. I began skipping the pleasantries. According to the UK's Consumer Credit Act, the interest rate you've charged far exceeds the legal limit, making it an illegal high-interest loan. Furthermore, you induced her to participate in illegal betting. This portion of the debt is built on an illegal activity, and its legal validity is questionable. Vinny the Scar cracked a smile, revealing a set of smoke-stained yellow teeth. Spare me the legal lecture, miss. This ain't a courtroom. She signed her name, took the money, and enjoyed it. She has to pay it back. Around here, we are the law. Don't pay, and there will be consequences. I remained completely unfazed. Michael Evans took a thin manila folder from his briefcase and pushed it across the table. Mr. Vinny, before we discuss Chloe Miller's debt, perhaps you should take a look at this, I said. Inside are photocopies of some less than public cross-border fund transfers made by you and your real boss, Mr. Thompson, over the past 18 months. There are also some photos from a few of your meetings with a money laundering network in Eastern Europe. They are enough to get Scotland Yard's anti-money laundering unit very, very interested in you. Vinny's expression changed instantly. He snatched the folder and flipped through it. His vicious demeanor turned to suspicion, and then a flicker of panic. Where did you get this? What do you want? You don't need to know the source, I said. Now let's make a deal. The principal that Chloe supposedly owes, I will, based on actual bank transfer records, return a reasonable amount. All interest and penalties are to be wiped clean. You will hand over all original loan documents and any material you have on Chloe Miller. From that moment on, you are done with her. Vinny clenched his jaw. The principal must be paid in full. That's my bottom line. Fine, I agreed, with an additional condition. I want William Thorne's detailed information and his whereabouts, and it would be best if he temporarily left London and stayed out of my sight. After some tense back and forth, he agreed. The threat of the blackmail material was far more significant than a dried-up well like Chloe. I had the money drawn from the Miller family's joint account, every expense meticulously documented, transferred in 2 installments. Vinny handed over the documents and arranged for William Thorne to lie low in Spain. I then had Michael Evans use some unconventional but effective methods to ensure Thorne's vacation was unpleasant and that he would never bother Chloe again. Only then did I, accompanied by Michael Evans, go to the luxury apartment in Mayfair. After we rang the doorbell, the door opened a crack secured by a chain. Chloe appeared. She was wearing a crumpled silk robe, her hair a mess, her face haggard and gaunt. When she saw me, she looked as if she'd seen a ghost and instinctively tried to slam the door shut. Chloe. I wedged my foot in the door. I'm going to give you 2 choices. You'll only hear them once. She struggled, but could only press futilely against the door, staring at me in terror. First, I said clearly, I turn around and walk away. You can stay in this pretty cage and wait for your creditors or your dear boyfriend to come and squeeze out your last bit of value before throwing you out on the street. Second, I stared at her deathly pale face. You let me in. You tell me every stupid thing you've done. Then you pack your essential belongings and come back to the US with me. You have 10 seconds. 10, 9. When I had only counted to 6, her legs gave out. She slid down the doorframe and collapsed, sobbing a raw, desperate wail filled with terror. Michael Evans easily disengaged the security chain. I pushed open the door and walked into the apartment, which reeked of stale smoke, alcohol, and decay. The living room was a disaster zone of shopping bags, empty liquor bottles, and takeout containers. I took a copy of the debt settlement confirmation and a meticulously worded promissory note I had prepared from my briefcase. I tossed them onto the marble floor in front of her. When you're done crying, crawl over here and sign these, my voice echoed in the messy apartment devoid of emotion. Sign the debt settlement, proving the family has paid off your mess. Then sign this note promising to never again ask for money beyond basic living expenses to return to the US and to accept supervision. Sign and I will take you home. Don't sign. I pointed to the open door, and you can stay here and face the consequences yourself. You have 5 minutes. Chloe looked up, her face a tear-streaked mess. The instinct for survival and the terror of her situation overwhelmed all her false pride. She crawled forward shakily, and with a trembling hand scrawled a nearly illegible signature on both documents, Chloe Miller. I knew this transoceanic farce, born of stupidity and greed, had finally reached its end. The return. Bringing Chloe back to the US was like a silent extradition. She was a soulless puppet curled up by the window for most of the flight, crying softly or staring into space. The few times our eyes met, she would flinch away, her gaze filled with fear and a complex, unspeakable resentment. Walking out of international arrivals at Logan Airport, I immediately spotted Leo and Sharon. The moment Sharon saw her gaunt, emaciated daughter, she burst into tears, running over and throwing her